Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be joined by Neil Sahota. We just recorded a couple episodes of the podcast and had a bunch of fun doing it. We talked about some really interesting topics, and Neil is an IBM Master Inventor. He's a United Nations AI advisor, professor at UC Irvine, and globally recognized speaker and author. He's a founding member of the UN's Artificial Intelligence for Social Good Committee, and he's also the author of Own the A.I. Revolution, providing future-forward look at AI, focusing on how businesses can use it to commercialize while doing good in the world. You can find more about him at neilsahota.com. Neil, what's up, man?
Not much, man. Enjoying the life. How you doing, Mario?
I'm doing good. I mean, it's at the time of this recording, it's a Friday, so I know you and I are gearing up for the weekend. Do you have any plans for the weekend?
Not as of yet. We're still technically under lockdown, so it's kind of tough because I'm in California and it's a really beautiful day. It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend.
Any idea when lockdown in California is going to end?
I don't know. I don't know. I know that a lot of the businesses are getting reopened, actually starting today, but things like people being together in mass, like at the office, still up in the air.
Mm. Yeah, here in Pennsylvania, they've gradually begin to let things kind of let them up. I mean, we still can't, there's a couple restaurants that are open, but for the most part, it's still mostly takeout and order ahead. But the world's in a really weird place these days.
It is. I don't think we understood the depth of the problem and what this means, right? And I hate to say it this way. I think one is really great and noble that so many people are willing to sacrifice for the high risk people. At the same time, we weren't meant to be locked away for so long, right? We're social animals, as they say, and I do worry about the amount of stress and anxiety people are in. And I keep reading about how domestic violence is arising and child abuse is arising. And I wonder what the long-term effects are going to be from like a mental health perspective.
Has has any AI solutions been discussed with you for this issue?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work actually around mental health and food production and safety. On the mental health side, there's people looking to say, there's some different initiatives going on around like kind of like a AI. I don't want to call it therapist, but like someone you can talk to. So if you're having an episode or you just need an outlet, that there's a non-judgmental machine willing to listen. And AI is good enough now with artificial empathy to be able to read your emotional state. So it can detect if you're happy, you're sad, and it'll dynamically change how it interacts with you based off that. So at least people have that outlet. On the food side, we all know that we're having massive issues on not just shortage of supplies, but farmers are dumping millions of gallons of milk and lots of vegetables and fruits are rotting in the fields. Is there a way we can actually connect the farmers with the local people? So kind of cut out some of the middlemen to at least try and get some of these things to where they need to be and not let things waste and people go hungry at the same time.
I think AI has come farther than I've even realized. I mean, artificial empathy is something that's more human than
It's,
but
is it scary, Mario, that it seems like in some cases the machine is better at reading the emotions of another person than we are?
that's super interesting because yeah, I mean, what reading someone, being able to detect and feel emotions, empathy, as we call it. I think for a lot of people, it's like it's something that they're just innately good at, a certain piece of the population. And I think that the other piece of the population that it may not be their strength are starting to come around the more we talk about it and kind of empathize so that we can all do better. We can all do more good in the world. But the fact that a machine can you can create an algorithm, so to speak, that detects what someone is feeling and then how to react based on that feeling, that's something that's just kind of mind blowing.
Well, the machines have a bit of an advantage on us in that they don't get distracted, right? Like when you and I are talking,
They don't have baggage.
they don't have baggage. They're not simply worrying about like, you know, kids in the background or a dog in the background or anything like that, or thinking about what to say next. They get the laser like focus on you. And the machines also have the advantage because we've seen that people are more honest when they talk with the machine. It doesn't matter if it's your doctor of 20 years or lawyer or accountant of 20 years. People feel more comfortable sharing things with the machine because they feel like they're not getting judged. I mean, think about it, Mario. If you go see your doctor 20 years, the doctor's like, let's just do a health assessment, ask some questions. They suddenly ask the question, well, on average, how many drinks do you have per week, right? What are you going to say? I have a couple of glasses of wine, just socially. But when the machine asks the questions, we're hearing stuff like, well, I have like 3 whiskeys a day during lunch, and bottle of wine is like a nightcap, you know? And it's surprising that we would do that, but even if we know our doctor really well, we feel like they're going to judge us if we tell them that.
Now, granted, judgment's part of it, and that's a great example that you just used there. But the second piece is, do you think that if I tell it to the machine, I can always take it back later?
That's a great
Like,
question.
yeah.
Machines have eidetic memories. They remember everything they hear, see, read, learn, experience. It's very hard for a machine to forget. Like in my IBM Watson days, we let Watson read the Urban Dictionary. It could not stop cursing. Think about it. You want to try and explain to a small child when one of the right times to curse, the wrong times to curse. How do you do that to a machine that doesn't even understand some of these emotional feelings, right? It's like, oh my God, this was a huge mistake. I should never have done this.
That's fun. So, how did you solve that problem?
We basically had to remove that like instance of Watson and go back to an earlier one where it hadn't read the Urban Dictionary. So thankfully we had a backup. But yeah, there was no way to unteach. You couldn't just strip that Urban Dictionary information out of Watson. It's there forever.
I think that's a great lesson, though, because, as human beings, while we may not memorize every single word that we read in the Urban Dictionary, for instance, we still get an experience of that, and our subconscious mind still holds on to that. And you can't go back to an earlier instance of a human being, right? Whereas you may be able to do that with Watson, but just think about the ongoing effect that exposing like a young child or someone who's in the development phase to something. There's going to be an ongoing effect from that. You can't take it away once they've been exposed to that.
You can't, but that's the interesting thing, right? With people, because we can't take that away or take away our bad memories, we have to build resilience, right? We don't know how to do that for a machine. So at least we have the backup.
Whose idea was it to have Watson read Urban Dictionary?
It was not mine.
You can be honest here.
Well,
I'm not judging you. I'm like a
idea.
machine. So, but like, did the committee come? Like, no, number one, I guess my question is, what was the purpose for having him do that? Was it just to see the reaction that it was going to create?
We were doing a lot of work about teaching Watson about different human cultures and like pop culture. Like one of the things we did was we actually had taught Watson a little things about movies and stuff, and had Watson like watch the Star Wars movies and kind of give its impression about the movies and the characters. We did another thing where, if you ever seen the show Breaking Bad,
Oh yeah,
right, we gave Watson the information from the TV show that the police had. So not us as a viewer had, but just the police in the show had. And I think it was just the first 3 seasons, and Watson was able to deduce who Heisenberg was. I won't say, in case no one has seen this, some people haven't seen the show, but it was interesting to see how Watson kind of played detective and was able to connect some very, what seemed like disparate dots to us as people, but actually saw real meaning and connection between them. And Watson was right. I mean, Watson accurately predicted who Heisenberg really was.
as you're creating something like that, I assume it takes a number of different people doing different things, combining different things to create what you named Watson. And it's I guess where my hang up is like, as Watson deduces things and figures things out, since we built Watson, wouldn't we, and I'm saying we as like the team that built Watson, wouldn't we know as human beings what Watson's capable of? Like, how does that get derailed and Watson like does its own thing when you're the creator? Like, I get it with God. God creates us. He gave us free will. He said, you can go make your own decisions. Now that's God. Obviously, we're not God, but we can create with what he gave us to create with. So when we create that, how do we quote unquote lose control, so to speak? And when I say lose control, I don't mean like it goes off the wires and takes everything over, but I mean, how do we get to the point where we teach it something, but we can't predict what conclusion it's going to come to?
That's actually already happening, right? One of the things we actually did with Watson is when we created it or invented it, we put in a way for Watson to explain its thought process. So if it ever arrived at a conclusion or recommendation and we didn't get it, we could actually have Watson explain to us how it arrived. But not everyone does that. And that's the challenge, because machines learn much faster than we realized. They, in some respects, think differently about things than we do, even though they may arrive at the same conclusions. But we've reached a point where I think some people are working on AI stuff they don't fully understand, and they don't recognize the limitations that we as people have that machines may not have. And a good example of that is Facebook. I think it was like maybe a couple of years ago, they had for their messenger, it had an AI system as part of it, and they created two versions of the AI to try and talk to each other to see what would happen. And very quickly, the two AI instances went from talking in English to some what appeared to be gibberish language. And the programmers are like, what the heck is going on? They quickly shut it off. They're like, what happened? And I think it took some weeks of digging into it, and they brought in some linguists and all that, some domain experts. What they figured out was that the two AI instances realized that English was an inefficient way for them to communicate, right? Their thought process is so fast, right? They're doing trillions of thinking seconds per second that they had to find a more effective language to communicate in. And we didn't think of that, right? Number one. And two, because we suddenly didn't know what was happening and there was no way to ask the AI what you're doing, freaked out and shut it down.
So it
So,
actually invented its own language.
and essentially inventing a more efficient language for itself.
That's unbelievable. That's crazy. How do you, so when you're out there and you're doing this stuff, and I know you're focused on the social good, which is what I like, because it seems like, now I don't want to jump to, because we talked a little bit about Terminator in the podcast episode. So I don't know, because I'm not in the world that you are, whether AI can take over the world like that or not. But I don't think that people want it to. And I think people like yourself who are focused on the social good are keeping it from getting to that point.
We are, and machines don't think for themselves. They're passive. They only respond to queries. It's not like Watson or Google Brain sitting out there thinking like, I have nothing to do. I'm going to teach myself how to make a rocket. They're not doing that. They're not capable of that. But the machines can only do what we teach them to do, and that's the real concern. Is that when we teach them, do we teach them some bad habits, bad behavior? We look at what's happening right now, like especially with implicit bias. That's a really big problem. One of the things that I've been working on with the UN, they've really gun ho on this idea of AI robots, AI robot judges, right?
Mm.
They feel like if you did this, you would reduce corruption in the court system, you'd improve access to justice, more fair trials. And theoretically, you're absolutely right. The problem, though, is like if you look at the US court system, there's tons of data we could use to try and train AI on this. But is there implicit bias in that? Would an AI look at some of the things and say, like, hey, okay, wait a second, these two guys, similar crime, similar age, some of these, kind of things, but this guy got 6 months of jail time and this guy got 10 years of jail time. It's going to start saying, like, why is that different? What's different about these people? Is it going to start saying, like, well, this guy over here is one ethnicity and this guy over here was a different ethnicity, and draw the conclusion, well, this ethnicity gets lighter sentences and this ethnicity gets harsher sentences, right? That's the huge problem that we have. It's us and our data. If it's flawed, if it's biased, the machine's not going to learn right? And it's going to replicate these bad behaviors. That's the real big fear everyone has.
Mm. That is a conundrum, isn't it? In human beings, I mean, I guess the AI can only be as effective as the creator.
It can, but I think it's also one of the reasons why we have to have diversity and inclusion in teaching the AI. We have to think about different perspectives. It's hard for us to see our own unconscious biases, which is why we need those different perspectives. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick on Google, but they released a hate speech detector that turned out to be racist. They also, a couple of years ago with Google Vision, very, very good visual recognition AI software, they it was really good at identifying people if you were white and male, not if you're a woman, not if you're another ethnicity. And if you were African American, it often confused that person as a gorilla, which is the racial epithet.
Hmm.
I don't think Google meant to be racist. I don't think they were trying to do that in either instance, but it's quite possible that when they were developing and training the AI, it was predominantly white men doing that, and they were probably using pictures of themselves to teach the concept of what a person looks like. And we don't realize that. It's the exact same thing that I could give an AI 100,000 pictures of people to help them identify different characteristics. But if none of those people are wearing glasses, the AI doesn't understand then that glasses, something on the eye still means person, right? That's the sensitivity level we have to actually try and get to. We have to think about all these variations on a thing or a person.
That's a challenge. I mean, but I think that the problems or the solution to that starts with us individually changing the way we look at the world and being more, inclusive and accepting and just better people in general.
100%, Mario. Right? I know it's tough. I know it's tough. We're a product of our environment, our upbringing, our experiences and knowledge. It's hard to kind of step away from ourselves, see the forest from the trees, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge that you bring up is when developing this, it's not it can be, but it's probably not always a conscious thing, right? It's just you're just doing what you think you're doing with no ill intent, but then it ends up because the AI can only learn what you teach
Yeah, it's just much like giving Watson the Urban Dictionary. We
it.
never thought about the cursing aspect, right?
That's so funny. Did you guys was it hilarious? Were you laughing before you actually went in and fixed it?
At first, yeah, thinking, oh, this is cute, right? And then we realized, wait a second, it can't stop cursing. What are we going to do? How do you teach a machine appropriate times to curse and not curse?
That's funny. Man, well, Neil, thank you so much for being here. I've so much enjoyed our conversation, not only here on this video, but also in the podcast. I want to remind people, if you're watching this video on social media, the podcast is probably coming very soon, so keep an eye out for it. If you're listening to this on the podcast, then the episodes are there. So go back, listen to them, check them out. We had some great conversations. We had some deep conversations about AI, where the world's headed. Just so much fun. Thank you so much. Again, neilsahota.com is your website where people can find you, grab a copy of your book, all of that stuff. Thank you again for being here. Let's do this again soon because, the technology is always changing. Things are always, ramping up. So I think that there's something that we can talk about moving forward into the future that's new that we probably don't even know exists yet, probably doesn't exist yet, right?
For sure. And I would love to come back. Always great conversations with you, Mario.
Thanks, Neil. We'll talk again real soon, my friend.